Even in the darkness of fear and oppression, the light of human resistance and resilience will not be snuffed out. Join the Unitarian Universalist Church of Columbia in our December 13th, 2015 service celebrating Hanukkah. Don't let the light go out.
On the 8th and final night of Hanukkah in 1932, in the small town of Kiel in northern Germany, Rachel Posner snapped a photograph of her family's menorah sitting in the window of their home. The background of the photo is the building across the street, an imposing structure draped in red and black swastika flags, home of the local Nazi Party headquarters. On the back of the photograph, Rachel wrote a short epigraph. "Death to Judah," so the flag says. "Judah will live forever," so the light answers. It would be a year or more before the Nazi Party took control over Germany, and more years still before their genocide began in earnest. But the writing, as they say, was on the walls. Rachel's husband, Akiva, was the rabbi of the congregation of some 500 Jews living in Kiel at that time. And he had recently written a letter to the local paper in protest of signs and posters plastering the walls all over town, "Entrance to Jews forbidden." It was not long after this, as violence and tension increased, that the Posners decided Germany had become too dangerous for Jews, and they departed for what would later become Israel. As they boarded their train, they exhorted their congregation to do the same, and most did, fleeing for the Middle East or the United States, so that when the anti-Semitic rhetoric and sentiment in Germany escalated to violence, imprisonment, and genocide, fewer than a dozen remained in Kiel. I don't wish to overblow a comparison of current Islamophobic rhetoric and sentiment in our nation to a preparation for genocide. But this holiday season, as I have read about increasing harassment and violence against Muslims in our country and vandalism of mosques across the nation, and as I have listened to politicians on the national stage suggesting ID cards for Muslims, refusal of entry to refugees and others, as I've heard of places of business plastering posters on their walls, "Entrance forbidden," and as I've been heartbroken, as I know we all have, by the ongoing reality of genocide that is already happening at the hands of ISIS in Syria and Iraq and elsewhere. As I have pondered these things and so many other broken and hurting places in this moment in our world, I've been thinking about that photograph and the daring and the hope of that menorah in the window 83 years ago. Those small candles against the imposing might of the Nazi headquarters. The light itself, a bold declaration that even in the darkness of fear and oppression, the light of the human spirit of resistance and resilience will not be snuffed out. As we near the last night of Hanukkah in our own time and in our own place, in this season and time of tension and strife, it remains a miracle. What an act of profound hope it can be to light candles against the dark, the dark that gathers around us in ways both literal and metaphorical. It remains a kind of miracle that hope and compassion are still being kindled in human hearts all over our world. The hope of refugees and resistors. The hope of climate activists and anti-racist protesters. The hope of parents against gun violence and families building resilience in a broken economy and women claiming their autonomy. Hope reflecting that epigraph scrawled so many years back across the back of that photo. When the flag signals death, the light answers with life. With their parables of light in the darkness, our religious traditions prepare us for such a time as this, for the facing of the darkness and the light both, for resistance to the life-denying oppression of empire, for the miracle of courage and compassion, even in the face of turmoil. This week, our Jewish friends and neighbors reflected once more upon the story of Hanukkah, of the ancient Jews' persecution under Greco-Syrian Emperor Antiochus, the desecration of their temple, the victorious rebellion of the Maccabees, and the rededication of the temple with a day's worth of sacred oil that miraculously burned for the 8 required for rededication. This week, all over the world, our Jewish friends and neighbors lit candles of miracle and resistance for the victory of faithfulness and hope over life-denying forces of control, a light that would not be diminished. And soon, our Christian friends and neighbors will tell the story once more of love eternal, come down to dwell among us, taking the form of a tiny, helpless baby, and confounding the powers of empire by aligning God with the lowly and the weak. They will tell once more the story of a star hung over a child in poverty and social disgrace in a dusty barn, a star that still named him wonderful, precious, Prince of Peace, as we all have the potential to be. And in the solstice tradition, the light and the dark will be held soon in balance, in paradox, as great bonfires slowly call back the sun, predicting an end to the scarcity and deprivation of the long winter nights and short winter days, reminding us of all that is possible. A lamp burning on impossibly, a star above a baby improbably, the return of the sun inevitably. These are the seasons of light we welcome now into a time named in this morning's reading, a time of war and tumult of war, of fear and lust for power, license and greed and blight. In the face of a beautiful and terrible moment, with the wisdom of many faith traditions, we remember that we are light. We remember all those who resist and have resisted life-denying cultures throughout the ages. We remember that small menorah burning strong against the backdrop of the Reich. We remember the lamp that may be lit this night somewhere in a refugee camp in Greece. And we remember the trees that will be lit across our community, even in homes visited by struggle and despair. In this season of darkness and light, we kindle our own candles of hope and courage. The kindling of the light itself, a small act of resistance to sustain the human spirit. A shout into the night that the spirit remains unbroken. And that light is also a guide for us, a spark leading the way into a darkness that we must enter if we are to find hope and resilience for the unknown days that lie ahead. In her book, Hope in the Dark, Untold History's Wild Possibilities, journalist and activist Rebecca Solnit writes of a journal entry by Virginia Woolf at the start of the First World War, when Woolf scribbled down, "The future is dark," which is, on the whole, the best thing the future can be, I think. Solnit writes, "Dark," Woolf seems to be saying, as in inscrutable, not as in terrible. We often mistake one for the other. The truth is, she points out, as often as not, the darkness of the future is a site of possibility and openness, just as much as terror or annihilation. There have been countless movements in our history, she points out, when a dark and uncertain future has unfolded for the better because of the imagination and openness of a few or many. These moments of transformation become possible through the dark. And she writes, they begin in imagination and hope. She says to hope is to gamble. It's to bet on the possibility that an open heart and uncertainty are better than gloom and safety. To hope is dangerous, and yet it is the opposite of fear, for to live is to risk. I was so struck by that. Hope is a bet that an open heart and uncertainty are better than gloom and safety. Certainly, the winter stories we share in this season of light are ancient examples of this. In the stories we recall this season, triumph is not in the safety or victory of battle, but in the temple's rededication to peace and faith and light. Triumph is not in the certainty of the coming of a king, but in the vulnerability of a baby and the risk of love made penetrable flesh. Triumph is the flickering candle lit against the dark, the menorah burning defiantly in the window against a backdrop of totalitarian terror. It is the risk of living. When the flag signals death, we resist with candles of hope, claiming life, even and especially amid uncertainty and risk. So here emerges, for our consideration this month, another definition of hope. Hope is the capacity to move into an uncertain future with imagination and a sense of possibility. Hope is the capacity to stay human by staying open to one another and to a future that is still unfolding. In this way, hope is a kind of courage, the courage to choose possibility, even over security. We see throughout history, from the ancient stories to the rise of the Nazis in Germany to hysteria we have faced again and again and face today, that the oppressions and divisions of empire thrive on fear and come to power by promising the people security. They offer a false sense of hope by limiting diversity, limiting the future, limiting possibility. This closing off of the openness of the future makes us feel secure and safe. But the same limits that give us security also diminish our sense of the possible and usher us all too easily into acquiescence or even despair. This is why a true hope insists upon possibility and even upon risk. True hope finds its triumph each time we manage to keep our hearts and minds open to each other and what may come, even if that doesn't feel so secure. Solnit writes, "To hope is to give yourself to the future. Anything could happen, and whether we act or not has everything to do with it. The future is dark," she says, "with a darkness as much of the womb as of the grave." Hope insists in darkness that we can choose love and connection and open-heartedness, even through times of division and fear. We learn this from the traditions that guide us with candles in the dark, reminding us that in an open future, anything is possible, and our openness to that possibility matters. The burning of the oil for 8 days in the temple was a declaration of possibility in the face of the impossible. The claim that a tiny baby born to a single mother and an impoverished stepfather could be the king of a nation was a declaration of possibility in the face of the impossible. And the balance of dark and light, marked by solstice traditions, is a reclaiming of the paradox of the impossible possible, as the two are twined and wrapped up in one another. The future is open in the dark, awesomely, startlingly, terrifyingly, beautifully open to any number of possibilities. We may yet descend into another world war. We may find the kind of human compassion and solidarity that emerges as true freedom. Both may come to pass at once. The future is dark in that our times are indeed uncertain, but with the spark of open hearts to guide our way. The darkness we now face can be the darkness of the womb and not of the grave. We can respond to the openness of our future with fear or with hope, with the shutting down of options and the shutting out of people, or with brave steps into the unknown dark, with open hearts as candle bearers lighting the way. If we are to resist the forces that divide us in this time, the forces that seek to conquer our hearts, then we must choose hope, choose to embrace the dark, and become bearers of the light. Quoting Solnit one last time, she says, "I say all this to you because hope is not like a lottery ticket that you can sit on the sofa and clutch feeling lucky. I say this because hope is an axe you break down doors with in an emergency. Because hope should shove you out the door. Because it will take everything we have to steer the future away from endless war, from the annihilation of the earth's treasures and the grinding down of the poor and marginal. Hope just means another world might be possible, not promised, not guaranteed. It is ours then in this time to choose the possible and to make it real with our love. It is ours to light candles of hope against every backdrop of tyranny and fear. It is ours to open our hearts and with them our hands to each other and to the work of building the world we imagine. It is ours to choose the belief, in the words of Rabbi Brant Rosen, that it is not by might nor cruelty, but by a love that burns relentlessly, that this broken world will be redeemed. It is ours in this season to become that light, to embody that love that burns relentlessly. And so I end with a blessing for light bearers by the poet Jan Richardson. Blessed are you who bear the light in unbearable times, who testify to its endurance amid the unendurable, who bear witness to its persistence when everything seems in shadow and grief. Blessed are you, in whom the light lives, in whom the brightness blazes, your heart a chapel, an altar, where in the deepest night can be seen the fire that shines forth in you, in unaccountable faith, in stubborn hope, in love that illumines every broken thing it finds. In this season and always, may you be the bearers of light. May you go forth into this season as bearers of light and embracers of darkness. May you go in blessing and be a blessing to a world that needs your care. Let us sing our benediction.